Lecture 36.
Will you turn to your 3 versions of the Sermon on the Mount so I can very rapidly complete it, please? And keep your notebook handy because I'm going to tell you some things that are not in the text now. Are not in the text. If I should ask you on the examination what the Beatitudes represent, can you give me a good, concise answer? What were the Beatitudes designed to do? They have been accepted as platitudes, but they had a special purpose. What was Jesus trying to outline? The whole process of going through the rebirth process from the time that you very humbly, discouragingly, and sometimes poor in spirit approach the Lord and say, I've made a mess of my life, I've made mistakes, I mourn for what I have done, will you lead me on up? And you go all the way up to the point where you are able to take the pressure that comes with persecution and reviling and stand up and bear witness that you're a person that's sensitive and merciful, that you have the capacity to be a very mature, outstanding human being. And then he went into specific things and said, you are actually what I'm depending upon to give meaningfulness to life. You're the salt of the earth. You're the one that gives flavor to a family, to a community, to any place you are. You stand for something. And he said, I want you to be a light up on the hill. I don't want you to be hidden under a bushel. You remember all of those things. Now let me go very quickly here to the next point. Will you take notes on this now? Moses received 2 sets of laws. When he brought Israel up out of Egypt, he was first given the law of the covenant, which is the gospel law. It's everything we have today. And the 10 Commandments is part of it. It's called the gospel covenant or the gospel law. That's what he first received. He was told the temple endowment. He got all the higher Melchizedek priesthood ordinances copied by the hand of God on both sides of a set of rock tablets. It took him 40 days and 40 nights to be instructed on how to do the temple ceremony and all the things connected with it. At the end of the revelation, God says, Moses, I am now going to transfer all of the adults that are down in the camp over to the spirit world. I am going to slay every one of them and only leave for you those who are under 20 years of age. Moses said, what have they done? He said, they have offended me. They do not deserve to live after all I have done for them. It would be better if I just brought them over to the spirit world. Moses pleaded with the Lord. That included his brother and his sister, and he said, please, I think I can work through them. The Lord says, you do? Well, I'll give you a chance. Go down and see what they've done. He got down there, and here they were, 3,000 of the men, and we assume an equal number of the women, stripped naked, drunk, and getting ready to participate in sacramental fornication after the order of the worship of the bull. And Moses was so outraged. Here he had in his hand the higher temple ordinances and everything. He just took those tablets, put them together, and smashed them against the mountain. And he said to you people that were the ones that were down in the pit, naked, intoxicated, getting ready for an Egyptian orgy, he said, you put this whole camp, the lives of every adult in this camp, into jeopardy. And so you're going to be transferred to the spirit world, and I'm going to be the executioner. Now he said, who will participate in this? And only his own tribe, the tribe of Levi, agreed to help. And all of them were dispatched. And he said to Aaron, what in the world were you doing? Well, he said, I tried to delay them. You were gone for 6 weeks. I didn't know what had happened to you. Everybody thought you were dead. They were getting ready to go back to Egypt. So he said, I tried to delay them. I made them, they insisted on having something to pass away the time, and I made them the image, and I had them, just this morning they offered sacrifices, but then they rose up to play, and I couldn't control that. Well, Moses said, I'm going up to talk to the Lord again. I'll see if I can save your lives, but he's outraged with what you've done. So he went up for another 40 days and 40 nights. That's 80 days. With just 1 day's of food and so forth in between, obviously indicating that he was under the influence of the Spirit of the Lord up there and in suspended animation. He went back for another 40 days and 40 nights, and the Lord gave him the second set of laws called the Law of Moses, or the Carnal Commandments. And these were dietary laws. They were all kinds of trivia. From the moment you get up until you go to bed at night, over and over, you got to do all these things. You got to remember to say this. You wear the phylacteries on your hand and so forth. You do all these things to, well, it's just tiresome to read about it, let alone have to do it. It's trivia. And Paul said it was a schoolmaster to bring you to Christ, so that at least the Savior could be born of a people who would remain intact as a people. And of course, the dietary laws would keep you from going down among the Gentiles and having dinner, because you don't eat anything they eat. You got a nice big ham steak, you see. Got a shrimp cocktail. They're drinking drinks you can't drink. So you sit there and ask them, don't you have any bread, milk? I have a little bread and milk, please. There's a banquet. What do you want, bread and milk? Well, that's all you got I can eat. And then they say, well, you have some meat? No, I can't eat meat with milk. Oh, it was strict. I'll tell you, it was a strict dietary law. So in any event, it kept them by themselves. They ate by themselves. And as a result of that, they were able to remain intact as a people. Now, with the coming of Christ's resurrection, all that was wiped out. So he says here next, when he's talking to the people, he said, now I don't want you to get the idea that I came to destroy the old law, because all I have come to do is to fulfill it so that the law of carnal commandments isn't significant anymore. You don't need blood sacrifices anymore. That represents the Father's sacrifice of his Son. And after he was sacrificed and talked to the Nephites, he said, it's all done, you see. I don't want any more blood sacrifices at all. That's not acceptable to me anymore from you. And no more dietary law. And no more circumcision. No more circumcision. That's all fulfilled. Now, when he came to the Nephites, was it easy for them to buy this? Was this easy? I'll tell you how hard it would have been. After they'd been so careful doing a lot of these things, it's just like having the Lord suddenly say to you, which he wouldn't because this would be bad, but supposing he suddenly said to you, now I want you to get up every morning and drink a cup of coffee, first thing. Then I want you to smoke a cigarette and go to work. You'd say, no, that isn't right. I don't do these things. Well, in this case, it wouldn't be right. But to come along and suddenly say, you don't circumcise children anymore, you don't have blood sacrifices anymore, would be almost as traumatic as telling you now to start breaking the word of wisdom, which you didn't used to do. You follow that? You see what an impact that was? So that when Jesus tells them, these sacrifices aren't necessary anymore, it was almost like telling them that something that used to be good isn't good anymore. And that was awfully hard for them to get to absorb that. You get in the habit of doing it for so long.
Nephi been telling the people to look forward to the time when that law would be done away with?
Yes.
Weren't they living still in the spirit of the higher law, even though they were commandments of the law?
I suppose a lot of them were, but a lot of them, you see, got caught. They say, you really mean you don't want circumcision anymore? Wasn't that an eternal law for Abraham? Yes, for him, but not for you. It's being changed. And you notice in the next chapter, Jesus has to say, my friends, I am the law. And I am telling you what is acceptable and what is not. That used to be acceptable. It isn't now. I gave the other law. Now I'm giving you a new law. That's hard for people to accept a change. Health purposes if they wish, but that's all. It's not required as an ordinance anymore. In those days it was an ordinance. It had to be. Okay, then he says, now I came to fulfill the law. All right, now, when he talked to the Jews, he said, now you've got to be more righteous than the scribes and Pharisees. If you're not, that's not a plus for the Lord. He's got scribes and Pharisees. You've got to do better than that. Did he say that to the Nephites? You'll notice over here he never mentions scribes and Pharisees to the Nephites. We're on page 4 if you've lost your place. He just says, therefore come unto me and be ye saved, for verily I say unto you that except ye shall keep my commandments, which I have commanded you at this time, ye shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. But notice how he said it to the Jews. I say unto you, except your righteousness shall exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. That made quite an argument, didn't it? But they don't know anything about scribes and Pharisees. Those all developed after Lehi left Jerusalem. Now wasn't that great? Joseph Smith could have, if Joseph Smith had been writing this book like some people claim, he could have just accidentally copied that in there and immediately you would have known there was something wrong. There were no scribes and Pharisees in America, only among the Jews. There are about 10 technicalities in this text that Joseph Smith could have slipped on. He's dictating at the rate of 5,000 words a day nearly, and just going through it, and you'll notice every time that very careful analysis illustrates that the passage should be different than the one given to the Jews. It's different. As Brother Nibley says, this book is so loaded now with internal evidence of its integrity that pretty soon you won't be able to get credit for accepting it on faith anymore. All right, then he says, now, you know that you're not to kill. Let me tell you something else. See if you can also keep from hating people. It's when you start hating people that you lay the foundation for killing. And I want you to see if you can purge from your heart the strong hatred that you have of people that have taken advantage of you or abused you or of which you are jealous or anything else. It's the element of hate that is related to killing. Now, I want you to rise on a little different plane. You're not going to be hanged or executed unless you actually kill somebody. But I want to tell you that to hate them enough to want to kill them is also an offense. Then he goes in, he says, by the way, what about yourself when you've made somebody else hate you because of what you've done to them? Don't you dare partake of the sacrament. If you have been an offender of somebody, lost your temper, and are now standing on your pride and dignity, don't you partake of that sacrament. Don't even pay your tithes. Don't do anything in the kingdom because it's tainted. Your gift is tainted to me. You go back and make your peace with that individual to the best of your ability. Make up to him the wrong you have done, and then you come and give me your tithes, and then you come and partake of the sacrament. Isn't that what it says? Then you bring your gift. I don't want your gift when you've gone and been an offense to somebody. And you went over and cheated that widow with her 5 children. You sold her that car that you said was worth $800 and it wasn't even worth $125. Now you go straighten that out. I don't want you here taking the sacrament.
Just on the point before, what's the counsel that they need you to have?
Right. Raka is a name which means stupid, insane. Oh, yes, you can be called up. Even under the Jewish law, you could be called up for that. And he said, I just want you to remember that it's also an offense against heaven. He's just kind of reminding them that don't wait until you've killed somebody to think you've offended. You're even subject to some censor when you're building up toward that hatred.
Isn't it the sinner who goes to church, though?
Oh, you mean don't even come to church? Well, what the...
That's showing the Lord that you appreciate it.
Yes. He says, I want you to... Here's the way he puts it. He said, have you come to church with a gift for me? Have you offended somebody? Is that why they're not here? You leave your gift. You just put your gift down or put it back in your pocket. You go back and straighten that out before you come back and make your covenants with me. Would you do that? See, that's what he's saying. In other words, don't come piously to church, you see. Taking of the covenant and so forth. When you actually have caused an offense of somebody, and that's why they're not here, so to speak, you've caused hatred in their hearts. I want you to avoid partaking of the sacrament or trying to pay your tithing or anything else till you've gone and straightened that out. Otherwise, your gift is tainted. Now, that's the way he teaches it, and I'm sure we understand the spirit in which it's meant.
He's just saying not to partake in the sacrament unworthily.
You would be partaking of it unworthily. So don't partake of it till you've gotten the thing straightened out. Now, this is talking about a person who's offended someone else. He said, let me just also remind you that when you have offended somebody and you owe them something, if you don't get it straightened out in time, they're going to take you to court and you're going to prison until you've paid the uttermost farthing, which was the practice in those days. They'd even sell their children or anything in order to pay off the debt. The brethren have said this actually is talking about hell as well. Reconcile yourselves so that Satan has no claim upon you. All right, now see if you can follow this. Back in the 40th chapter of Alma, it talked about what happens immediately after we die. We cross over on the other side of the veil, and we immediately are in the presence of members of the priesthood who are judging us. And they'll say, now, Brother so-and-so, you were baptized a member, weren't you? Oh, yes, yes, yes. And you were confirmed in the church. Oh, yes, it should be right there. And you went up through the ranks of the priesthood. Oh, yes, yes. Went on a mission. Yes, yes, New England States. Everything seems to be in pretty good order here. Looks like you should be allowed to pass. And there's a little obscure person sitting here at the side who rises up and says, "One moment, please." He turns to Brother so-and-so. He said, "Did you tell these gentlemen about our little hanky-panky that's been going on over the years?" "If you don't tell them, I will. You've been listening to me and obeying me and deceitfully doing what you've been doing for, lo, these 20 years. And while you may have done many things to please them, you did these things to please me, and I claim you. Gentlemen, he is mine until he has paid the uttermost farthing." And the brethren will have to say, "I'm sorry, brother. We will visit you." Now that's the way it works, and that's what it's talking about. How do you reconcile yourself with Satan so that he has no claim upon you? How do you do that? You can do it. How do you do it? Second principle of the gospel. Tell me all about it. You have to take those whisperings of his, reject them. No longer do them. Go to your Heavenly Father and ask for forgiveness, and if it's a very serious offense like a morals problem, go to the bishop who is a judge in Israel and is able to make a recommendation, and say to your Heavenly Father, "I want to be reconciled with you, and I want Lucifer to have no claim on me." Everyone understand that doctrine? Now that's what the Sermon on the Mount is talking about when it says, "And you will go into prison and pay the uttermost farthing." It not only happens in prisons in this life, it happens right over there beyond the veil. Now concerning adultery, he said, "You know, until the act of adultery is committed, you are not really guilty of the offense which is second to murder." Jesus said, "Let me just lift your minds a little higher. What about all the things that lead to fornication and pornography? What about the obscenity? What about the books that you drool over and imagine in your minds what you'd like to do if you just had a chance? That all has an influence on your spirit too. If you are an adulterer in your heart, this is an offense toward heaven. You're not going to be punished in the same way that you would if you'd committed the act. But see if you cannot fill your heart and soul and mind with things that are beautiful and righteous. Now it's built into every human being to want to be associated with the opposite sex. That was a wholesome pattern that was actually given to us. It's part of us. It's structured in us. Our Heavenly Father says, "I want you to deal with that force and power the way gods do. And that which is beautiful and attractive to you, this is no offense against heaven. But when you try to take advantage of it and get them to violate covenants or violate covenants yourself, this is an offense second only unto murder." And it is so important because it taints the very fountains of life which I have set up in order that all of my spirit children could be born well to worthy parents. And there are those that will not honor this pattern. Therefore, I take away the power to live in the family relationship after they get resurrected bodies. Only a few get that great privilege. Only those that will come under the discipline of the priesthood pattern and honor these great powers of procreation rather than abuse them. So Jesus said, "Will you lift yourselves so that your minds are filled with the beauty of romance and affection and love, instead of having it just adultery, fornication, exploitation, giving a fellow a line or a girl a line, as the case may be?" Now he said, will you be have a purity of mind as you approach the beauty of romance and the sweetness of a relationship that I want between men and women?
Is somebody commit adultery
Yeah, adultery, yes,
Okay,
Two people commit adultery.
high priest, and this is high priest, you know, on
The question is, if a person who is a high priest commits adultery, can he come back to the church after his excommunication? These are problems that confront us all the time. And those who are allowed to come back only under very strenuous circumstances. It depends on the circumstances and so forth that have contributed to it. The person is on probation a long time. He can never regain what he's lost. But he can come back and keep climbing. Now, it would be a very serious thing for him to assume that all is lost, because it is not. But he really has lost a lot. And so the church position is for him to repent, and to come back, to never allow himself to be thus tempted again. You see, this happened to a very famous young missionary we studied in this class. What was his name? Corianton. Did he have the higher priesthood? Yes. Did he eventually come back and prove to the Lord he really did want to be a great missionary? And the Lord gave him that chance. But he'd lost a lot. There's no doubt about that. He'd carried that scar in his own mind for a long time, even though he knew the Lord had forgiven him. He said, "You think how much further, how great it would have been if I hadn't done it."
Under the Levitical law, as recorded in the Old Testament, it is a crime against God to look upon a woman's nakedness. And I wonder if that has anything to do or is in any way related with the phraseology here in the 28th verse.
Yes, in Leviticus it's written the same way it is written here. It's an offense against God, but not a crime. There was no punishment for it. It was just stated that it was an offense against heaven. The one in Leviticus where it describes the looking upon the nakedness of another person, not because they're just naked, but it actually implies as in anticipation or preparation for the sex act. What is the difference? Oh, well, it usually is a question of circumstances, and it's left up to the bishop, or he is the judge in Israel that decides, and the person can then appeal to the stake president or the quorum of the 12 in the first presidency. But usually, for example, if a young couple, let's say a couple of youngsters, 13 years old, neither one of them quite appreciating how serious it was and everything, they get involved in an affair, they're just early teenagers and something, and they feel very badly about it. They call it the attention of the bishop, or their parents do. It somehow comes to his attention. They may just disfellowship them and teach them and work with them and see what, and then move along. You get an individual who is a member of a ward and actually has been guilty of seducing some young girl in the ward or something. That'll be excommunication. It nearly always is. I don't know of any time when it wasn't.
what's the difference in the punishment?
Well, the degree, the bishop just has to decide. The heavens have been offended, and are we going to make him start all over again, which would be the case with a returned missionary? He probably would require that he start all over again after having all those blessings and opportunities and having made his higher covenants in the temple. I think it would require excommunication. But he can be admitted into the church, or his disfellowshipment can be, he can be allowed back once. But the second offense is permanent. He cannot be admitted to the church again in this life. That's Doctrine and Covenants, section 42. Now, the role of the, let's see, we have one other here. There were two things that were told to the Jews that were not told to the Nephites. They're both blank. It's the offending eye and the offending hand. And we're not sure whether that's had special symbolism to the Jews, as some have suggested, the offending eye being the wife who offends, and the offending hand being the child, the son who offends, one's son and heir who offends. That if he's corrupting the whole family, he should be cut off, some have said. But all we have is what it says here, and I accept it as symbolism, the eye and the hand. Certainly, as the hand offends, the hand never offends unless the brain told it to offend. So cutting it off literally, that obviously doesn't apply. Now, when the Catholic Church was asked if they would allow the Bible to be printed, they said These are the two passages that would make it impractical to do that. Because our people, there are some simple souls that will go out and put out their eye when it looks on something it shouldn't have looked at, or cut off their hands. Now, some of the Catholic priests said, no, we don't believe that. Wycliffe and some of the others, these are all Catholic priests. We're going to go ahead and translate the Bible. We think the people can handle that as well as the priests. And so they went ahead, and some were burned at the stake for having tried it, you'll remember, and so forth. But finally we got the Bible published. Now, those are the two verses that were the main excuse for not allowing the Bible to be published for the laity. It's not even used among the Nephites in any event. Then here's the law of divorce. A man, now notice this is all Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about a woman putting away a man. He's talking about a man putting away a woman. Because in those days, when the culture had not lifted womanhood to the level where the gospel has her, which is equal with man, and she was subordinate, and men were putting away their wives, and Jesus said, that's absolutely illegal in the sight of God for you to take the initiative to say to your wife who wants to remain with you, you can't be with me anymore unless she's been untrue to you and has committed adultery. Then you can. It's justified. Now we have a completely different situation where a man and woman get married and then find that they are totally incompatible. Their lives are just ripped apart. All kinds of terrible things are happening between them. Ordinarily, perfectly good people, but they are just ruining their lives. And the wife comes to the bishop and says, this is impossible. This just isn't working out. Then they try to reconcile them. They try to see what is wrong. All kinds of efforts are made to see if that marriage can be saved. And we have one apostle and about 5 assistants that spend all their time trying to make bad matches at least reconciled. Because once we have joined together in marriage, it's a very sacred relationship, and the Lord wants it to be preserved. But he did say to his priesthood, what you join together will be joined in heaven, and what you separate will be recognized in heaven. So the president of the church is allowed, through the apostle who has the assignment, and the apostle merely makes recommendation, only the prophet can pass on these finally, that in certain situations where it's justified, that both have become an offense one to another, a separation is permitted. Now, I just wanted you to make the distinction here, because some people say, well, you just can't get a divorce except for adultery. That's not what the Lord said. The Lord said, you can't put away your wife unilaterally unless she has violated the moral code. You can't put her away and just say, I'm justified in putting you away. I just don't like you anymore. No, he is justified if she's been immoral. But some people have tried to apply that rule to all divorce separations. And the Lord makes it very clear to his prophets and other places that the purpose of life is to have what? What's the purpose of life? Men are that they might have, and it's the same with women, by the way. Men and women are that they might have joy. And so here we are in a relationship here upon the earth, and we're trying to work out things with husbands and wives and children. And these men are the priesthood. They're trying to seal things up for time and all eternity. And when a combination exists which is just absolutely mixing water and oil to everybody's consternation, the prophet of God has the authority to apply reason and common sense and say, what can be done here for the sake of all these poor kiddies that are caught in this maelstrom of fighting and bickering? What can we do to save this family, or help this family, or increase the joy and diminish all of this chaos that exists? So the presiding brethren have that authority, and they do reason with these things. But a lot of people, as the first presidency have said, a lot of people find themselves with the first presidency absolutely refusing to give a temple divorce. You can get a civil divorce if you want to, but we will not unseal it. And if the Lord will do it in the next life, maybe so. But we just don't think it's justified, and we're going to leave it right where it was. And that's what happens in a lot of those applications.
What if there was one of these water and oil situations in the time of Christ, but there had been no fornication?
It would have been the same thing. The priesthood can join and the priesthood can separate. But he was telling men, you are not authorized to put away your wives as they were then doing. Just, I like somebody else now, That was the rule he was laying down for men. And you notice that's all he's talking about. Then we have all these other situations, and people have tried to apply that rule to all of them, and it's too broad. That's all I'm trying to help you understand. Everybody with me? Okay.
What's the part about where he said that the man can put his wife away?
Yes, it forces her to violate. Well, this was a situation where, and this rule still applies in the church, that a person who is an offender and who causes a divorce, if they have remained an offender and have not been forgiven, if they enter into any other marriage contract, it's an adultery in the eyes of the Lord.
The other party can get married though, can't they?
The non-offender can remarry. Right.
What are the cases where there's children and you have a situation where the husband and wife just simply can't get along, yet they both love the children dearly? How can
Somebody's going to lose those children, or they'll both lose them. There's a lot in jeopardy when a man and a woman start separating and tearing apart their family. They both can lose them, and they can be sealed into other families. But now that's, of course, in church law, and that would take us a lot of time. I just wanted you to catch the general principle so that you'll understand how this is handled today, because that was given by Jesus against the men that were arbitrarily putting away their wives for very superficial reasons. Now I want you to notice now concerning oaths. Here's another one where what's the church that makes such a deal out of oaths? Won't take an oath in court or any place else. The Jehovah's Witnesses. All right, now notice here what the command of the Lord is. You are to perform unto the Lord your oaths. All right, now that's a command. In Deuteronomy, that's always been the command of the Lord. Don't make any sacred commitments except in the name of God. So that your commitment in marriage, in sustaining and upholding the Constitution, in telling the truth in court, all of these are oaths to God. Now you perform that unto God, meaning you're responsible unto God for their proper performance. But some of these Hebrew businessmen, here's what they were saying. This is a good deal. I swear by my head and my dear mother who is dead, God rest her soul, that this car is worth $625. So help me, you see. They were doing that all the time. I watch them do that in the Middle East now. They swear by everything that's holy. Their brothers, their sisters, their heads, the earth, the sun, the stars. They swear by everything. Jesus said, don't go around swearing. Just say yes or no. It is or it isn't. He didn't say not to take an oath in the name of God, because that's the only kind of oath God authorizes. And so our founding fathers took the third commandment and put it into our judicial system. So that when you go in to testify in court, you raise the hand to the square and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And that's the oath to God. Or even Supreme Court justices take the oath, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. Military service, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against foreign domestic enemies, so help me God. All right, now, I just wanted you to be sure that you understood what it meant when he said, swear not at all, but let your answer be A, and nay, nay. And some people have said, well, that's all you're supposed to do, just go around and say, nay, nay. No, he's talking about where you're making representations and commitments to people. All right, now very quickly here, the role of the peacemaker. The role of the peacemaker. Now, a peacemaker is one who's willing to be abused, be slandered, and lied about a little bit. He's not always demanding his pound of flesh. Up to the point where life is in jeopardy. Or there's some other factors that enter into it. But you're constantly having people do chintzy things against you, aren't you? Have you noticed that? They really shouldn't partake of the sacrament, really. And by the way, if you go to a person and ask their forgiveness, and they go into a tantrum, they're not only not going to forgive you, but they're going to take you to court and so on and so forth. After you've tried to do everything you could to make it up to them, pay them back, etc., they won't forgive you. What happens to that person? Everything that you did to him is now on him. in the eyes of heaven. Because sometimes they'll just ridicule you when you come to say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, I lost my temper. Or I shouldn't have, I oversold that product, that it really isn't that good. But here it is worth this much, and if you still want to go through the deal, we'll reduce the price to what it's really worth. And if they go into a tantrum and so forth and won't forgive you, that's no longer your problem, it's theirs. All right, now this business of turning the other cheek is not easy. And try to practice it if you can. The golden rule is easier to practice than this one. Because you do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Now that's not so hard. But when they've done unto you, now what do you do? That's not so easy. All right. We'll try and finish now next time.